The courtroom was suffocating with silence, as if the very walls knew something heavy was about to be said. Tris Brown walked in slowly, his footsteps echoing like drum beats of judgment across the polished floor. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. Not with the judge, not with the jury, and definitely not with Diddy, who sat across the room behind his defense table. His expression unreadable, but his presence felt like a thick shadow looming over everything. Chris's face looked different. This wasn't the performer people were used to seeing on stage. This was someone who looked like he'd been carrying a secret. For far too long, he made his way to the witness stand. The bailiff didn't even have to repeat himself. Chris raised his right hand and spoke before prompted. "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth." His voice was deep, but there was a tremor in it that no amount of fame or money could hide. Once seated, he didn't wait for a question. He looked out at the jury and said the words that changed the entire energy in the room. "I was there that night." The words hit harder than any accusation. A soft murmur stirred among the spectators before the judge lifted a finger for silence. Chris sat forward slightly. "I saw things," he said. "Things I wish I hadn't. Things I didn't talk about for years because I thought staying silent would protect me." He paused and looked directly at the defense table, where Diddy sat motionless, but it didn't protect anybody, least of all the people. He inhaled deeply, gripping the edge of the wooden stand as if grounding himself. Diddy threw parties that weren't just parties. These weren't birthday celebrations or industry get-togethers. They were events engineered, organized, and controlled by him. His people checked the lists. If you were invited, it was because he wanted you there. If you weren't getting in, period. You were either selected or forgotten. He leaned in a little, especially the women he selected. Most of them weren't just there to vibe. They were there to play a role, whether they knew it or not. And I saw it over and over again, girls coming in with boyfriends, agents, publicists. And by the end of the night, they were gone, pulled into back rooms only Diddy had the keys to. Rooms nobody asked questions about. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable video, he continued, "Make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss any new videos like this." Now, back to it. Chris's voice dropped, but the weight of it only grew heavier. "I remember one night in particular, the night that's never left my mind. There was a girl there. I won't say her name. She was new to the industry, young and definitely in a relationship. She came with her man. He was excited just to be invited. But somewhere during the night, she disappeared." He paused, voice trembling. "I saw Diddy whisper something in her ear. Then he motioned to one of his guys. She looked hesitant, scared, even, but she followed, like she didn't think she had a choice. That was the last time anyone saw her that night." The boyfriend left alone. He looked down, face tight. That wasn't the first time, and it wasn't the last. Did Diddy have this ability to make people feel like saying no to him was saying no to the entire industry? Like if you rejected him, your career was over. And for a lot of these women, these girls, he was the gatekeeper to everything they'd been working for. Music, modeling, access, fame. He controlled it, and he knew it. The courtroom was still. No one dared to move. The court reporters' fingers dared not to move too loudly. The jurors sat frozen, eyes locked onto Chris. Their pens were forgotten. The judge didn't interrupt. Diddy didn't move? The silence wasn't empty? It was full of something terrifying. Truth. And it had just begun spilling. Chris's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the glass of water beside him. He didn't take a sip, he just held it, as if grounding himself. Diddy had a room in the back of his house. They called it the Velvet Room. Not because of the furniture, but because once you stepped inside, everything got soft, quiet, controlled. You didn't hear music anymore, just murmurs, footsteps, breathing. That's where the real things happened, and only a few people ever got to see it. Chris sat back, blinking slowly. His voice didn't rise, but the weight behind it was suffocating. There was this girl. I'd seen her around the scene, pretty, sharp, talented. She didn't belong in that kind of place, but she came that night. Someone told me she just signed with a label. Diddy had connections with said. He took interest in her. He always took interest in girls like that. He exhaled through his nose, jaw clenched. I remember she looked uncomfortable from the moment she arrived. Kept looking over her shoulder, kept checking her phone. You could tell she wanted to leave. But they took her phone. That was rule 1, no phones. Diddy said it was for privacy, but we all knew what it was really for, control. Chris's hands gripped the armrest. I asked one of the guards where she went. He said, "She's with Mr. Combs now." That's what they always said. She's with Mr. Combs. Like that was supposed to mean everything was okay. Like that explained everything. But I'd seen the pattern. Once a girl went back there with Diddy, she didn't come out the same. Some cried, some disappeared, some came out acting like everything was fine but never showed up to another event again. He leaned forward again, his voice almost a whisper. I knew what was happening. I knew it wasn't right. But when I looked around, I saw the same expression on everyone's face. The look that said, don't say anything, don't get involved. You'll ruin your career. Chris's voice softened, and so I didn't. I stayed quiet. We all did. That's how he got away with it for so long. The judge adjusted in his chair but didn't speak. The jurors were frozen, as if moving wood. Break something sacred. Chris stared down at his hands. His voice now steady but low. I've had nightmares about that night, the way she looked when they led her away. The worst part is, I never saw her again. No one did. Her name vanished from the scene, like she was never there. But I remember everything. He looked up again, this time straight at Diddy. And so do you. Chris didn't blink. His eyes stayed locked on Diddy's face, and for the first time since the testimony had begun, Diddy finally looked up. Their eyes met, one man testifying, the other being accused. And for a moment, the weight of years, the hidden moments, the unspoken things, all filled the space between their stare like smoke in a sealed room. Chris didn't back down. He didn't flinch. He leaned forward and continued, voice cold and deliberate. There's a reason no one talks about what really happens behind those mansion gates. He said it's not because people didn't see anything. It's because people were trained to forget. He had a way of making you feel like you owed him. If he gave you access, you owed him silence. If he put you on a track, gave you a cosign, flew you out, dropped your name in a room full of executives, you kept your mouth shut. That was the price. And if you didn't pay it, you disappeared. He glanced toward the gallery, then back to the jury. I've seen artists with dreams step into that house and come out shadows of who they were. Girls full of energy and hope step into his VIP section and come out the next morning like their souls had been borrowed and returned damaged. And the worst part, we all acted like it was normal. He shook his head slowly, disbelief washing over his features. The first time I watched Diddy walk into a room and the entire energy shift, I realized this man wasn't just powerful, he was feared. There were producers who stopped talking when he walked in, executives who stood up straighter, artists who laughed hard at his jokes. But around women, it was different. It wasn't fear, it was obedience, like they already knew what was expected of them. Chris's hands gripped the edge of the witness stand again, knuckles tightening. I remember this one girl. She couldn't have been more than 21. She came to one of Diddy's Miami parties with a small group of friends, most trying to break into modeling. They weren't even invited directly. Someone had sent a text, said they might get in if they showed up looking right, and they did. He paused. I remember her wearing a gold dress. She stood out, not because she was loud, but because she looked terrified. He paused, as if the image returned vividly. She kept holding her purse in front of her stomach, like she was trying to hide. I caught her eye once. She smiled. But it was the kind of smile that begs for someone to notice. Something's wrong. He exhaled. I asked if she was okay. Before she could answer, one of Diddy's guys stepped in between us, told me she was needed backstage, said Diddy wanted to speak with her. His voice cracked for the first time, but he kept going. I didn't see her again that night. I asked around. No one had answers. Someone said she left early, but I knew. That was a lie. Her purse was still on one of the lounge chairs. The next morning, she and her friends were gone. They weren't at the hotel, weren't online. It was like they had vanished, like someone pressed delete. The jury shifted uncomfortably. One of the older jurors put down his pen, resting, both hands on the desk as if bracing for worse. Chris took another breath. There was this silence that followed every incident. It was a code. You don't ask, you don't interfere, you keep showing up, or you don't get invited back. That was Diddy's power. He didn't have to threaten people. He didn't need to raise his voice. He just controlled access. Access to fame, respect, money. You wanted the door to stay open. You closed your mouth. Chris turned back toward the judge, then to the jury again. I don't know where that girl is now. Maybe she's fine. Maybe she made it out. But the fact that I even have to say maybe, that should tell you something. That should tell you everything. There are too many maybes around Diddy, too many. Nights ending with missing pieces, faces you only see once and never again. He looked back at Diddy, sadness in his eyes. And we let it happen, over and over again. Chris's voice dropped low, but his words cut through the air like glass. People always ask me why I kept going back, why I showed up to those parties, why I didn't walk away when I saw what I saw. And the truth is, I was afraid, not of what I'd see next, but of what would happen to me if I walked away. That's what Diddy did. He didn't just create fear, he engineered it. He paused, looking down, then back up. Diddy didn't need to tell you directly to stay quiet. He let the industry do it for him. You lose calls. Your name stops getting mentioned in meetings. Your label slows down your release dates. You suddenly become difficult to work with. It isn't loud retaliation, it's silent exile. One moment, you're everywhere. The next, you don't exist. The jury sat stiff, pen still, eyes frozen. Chris looked at them. I saw it happen to others. Artists who spoke up, models who cried out, journalists who tried to ask questions. They disappeared from rooms where they used to be welcome. I got the message loud and clear. Diddy wasn't just a man, he was a machine. And if you tried to expose that machine, it buried you. Chris rubbed his hands together as if trying to warm them. Though the courtroom was perfectly heated, there was another night. Vegas, a penthouse suite at the Palm. Diddy had flown people in from New York, LA, even Paris. The whole place looked like a music video come to life. Drinks, lights, designer everywhere. But behind all that flash, it was the same pattern. Women were led into separate rooms. Security stood at every door. The music was loud, but in certain corners, dead silent. To silent. He leaned in. I went looking for one of my friends. She told me she wasn't feeling good and needed to step out. But she never came back. I went through the hall, checked the lounge. Nothing. Finally, I tried one of the doors that was usually off limits. One of the guards stopped me, said, "You don't need to go in. Mr. Combs is busy." That phrase again. Mr. Combs is busy. Chris's hands tightened into fists. I waited an hour. I texted her phone. No response. The next morning, she was gone. Literally. Flight changed. Number disconnected. Her Instagram deleted. Her booking agent told me she'd moved to Europe, but that didn't make sense. She had 2 shows scheduled in Miami. And then, a week later, someone told me quietly she was told to disappear for her own good. He looked around the room. You tell me what that means. What does for her own good mean when she went from smiling to ghost in 24 hours? That wasn't her choice. That was control. That was fear. That was Diddy. Chris's voice hardened. I used to think staying quiet made me neutral, as if I wasn't part of the problem. But silence is a choice, and in that world, silence is loyalty. And I was loyal, not to Diddy, but to fear. And that fear let him keep doing what he was doing, over and over and over again. He straightened in his seat. This isn't just about parties. It's about a man who turned fame into a weapon, who used access as leverage, who took people's dreams and twisted them into cages. And we all watched him do it. We cheered. We smiled. We posted pictures. And every time we did, we told him, keep going. You're untouchable. Chris's voice finally cracked. But no one is untouchable forever. He leaned back, eyes scanning the courtroom as if trying to remember who was really in front of him, his industry, the world, or his own reflection. Then he leaned forward again, and what came next didn't sound like testimony. It sounded like release, the kind of truth buried so deep it can only come out in pieces once you finally let it escape. I remember the first time I heard about the envelopes, he said slowly. At first, I didn't believe it. Thought it was just one of those wild stories people make up when they're jealous. But then I saw it with my own eyes. Girls leaving, private rooms, their makeup smudged, smiles gone, holding a small, thick envelope. He paused. I asked one of the guys working security what it was. He said, it's gratitude. That's how Diddy keeps everything quiet. He looked down at his hands. It wasn't just cash. It was a payoff. It was hush money. I saw it handed out in club bathrooms, in black SUVs outside the gate, even on private jets. Sometimes it came in bags, sometimes in shoes. It was always discreet, but everyone knew what it meant. You got the envelope. You shut your mouth. The more envelopes you took, the more silence he owned from you. Chris shook his head, almost angry with himself. I knew what it was. I knew what it meant, but I didn't say a word. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I didn't see enough to get involved, but that was a lie. I saw plenty. I saw the looks in their eyes. I saw the fear, and still, I stayed quiet because I wasn't ready to lose everything. He looked up, eyes burning. That's what made Diddy dangerous. Not just the money, not just the fame, but the fear. Fear that if you crossed him, your whole world would collapse. One call, and labels would stop returning your messages, fashion brands would cancel. Your deals, DJs would stop playing your songs. You'd be blacklisted without a single headline. It would just happen. Quiet, silent, absolute. He swallowed hard. Then there was a woman I used to work with, talented, respected, strong. She got too close to the truth. I don't know exactly what she saw, but I know she started asking questions. She tried to talk to a journalist. She didn't even name names. She just hinted at what was happening at Diddy's events. Within 2 weeks, she lost her biggest endorsements. The magazine that promised her a cover pulled it. A streaming platform removed her special. Her team told her to lay low. But what they really meant was apologize to him or disappear. Chris's hands trembled slightly. And I still said nothing, because if they could do that to her, they could do it to me. So I kept my mouth shut, played the game, smiled for the cameras, showed up when invited, pretended I didn't notice that every time Diddy entered a room, women got nervous. He paused. Then came the night that changed everything for me. The courtroom stiffened, the shift in tone undeniable. It was a birthday party, not for Diddy, for someone else. But Diddy was there, and once he walked in, it became his event. The whole mood flipped. Music changed. People cleared the way. Girls were brought over to his section, as if it was automatic. I was sitting on the other side of the lounge when I saw him notice a girl. She was young, too young. You could tell just by looking. She was with a group of models, clearly new to all of it. She didn't even know where to stand. Chris's jaw tightened. Diddy pointed at her. One of his assistants walked up, whispered something in her ear. She looked confused. Then the assistant took her by the wrist and led her away, not through the crowd around it, but toward one of the side rooms with tinted glass. He paused, voice heavy. I watched. I didn't blink. I watched the door close behind them. I never saw her come back out. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he looked into the jury. That's when I knew. This wasn't just manipulation. This wasn't about parties or power. It was about taking people who were trying to survive and using that desperation as a weapon. He didn't need to ask for silence. He created it with fear, with money, with opportunity, dangled just close enough to touch. Chris leaned in, voice low. And we let him. That's the moment I realized. It wasn't just rumors. It wasn't exaggeration. It was real. And if I kept my mouth shut, I was just as guilty. Chris's voice grew softer. I don't know her name. I don't know what happened when that door closed, but I know what I saw. I saw a man take advantage of a situation. I saw people look away, and I saw a girl who didn't want to be there get led into the darkness by someone who knew no one would stop him. He paused, then added. He stared straight ahead, unmoving, and that someone was Diddy, the prosecutor. Stepped back and nodded to the judge, signaling the end of Chris's direct testimony. The judge turned toward the defense. You may proceed. Diddy's lead attorney stood up slowly, adjusting his suit jacket like he was preparing for a performance. He walked deliberately toward the witness stand, his expression calm but calculated, carrying the weight of every headline, every accusation, every reputation his client had ever paid to protect. Mr. Brown, the attorney began, voice smooth, almost to gentle. You've said a lot here today. Strong words, heavy claims. I want to make sure we separate emotion from fact because this court deals in evidence, not memories warped by time or fame. You understand that, right? Chris didn't blink. I understand what truth is, and that's what I'm giving you. The attorney gave a tight smile. So, you're saying under oath that your memory is perfect. That what you saw years ago during dimly lit parties and late nights is crystal clear today. Chris leaned slightly forward. When someone gets hurt, when something's wrong, you don't forget it. Not even the shadows. The attorney circled around him slowly, tone sharpening just slightly. Let's talk about your own past. Mr. Brown, controversies, headlines. We've all seen them. Some would say your reputation isn't exactly spotless. Wouldn't that make it convenient to try and flip the spotlight away from yourself? Chris nodded slowly, as if expecting that exact move. You're right, I've made mistakes, big ones. I've paid for them, lived with them, but what I'm doing here, that's not about hiding. It's about taking responsibility for what I saw and for what I didn't say when I should have. The lawyer didn't back down. And yet you waited. You waited years to come forward. You waited until there was a spotlight, until others started talking. Why now, Mr. Brown? Chris's answer came without pause. Because no one else did. Because I was tired of watching these stories get buried. Tired of looking the other way. He paused, eyes narrowing. Because that girl in the hallway, the one who couldn't even walk straight, I see her face every time I close my eyes, and I decided I'd rather lose everything than live with myself. Another day, knowing I stayed silent, the attorney took a beat, then said, You're a performer, Mr. Brown, a storyteller. How can we be sure this isn't just another story? Something crafted for attention, for clout, for redemption. Chris looked out across the courtroom, straight into the eyes of the jury. Because I'm not getting anything out of this. Not fame, not money. I've got more to lose than gain, but I don't care anymore. He pointed directly at Diddy. That man has used silence as currency for years. I was part of that silence. I'm not anymore. The attorney raised a brow. So, you admit you were complicit? Chris nodded. His voice lowered, but gained intensity. We all were. Every person who went to those parties and saw something off and said nothing. Every label executive who heard whispers and chose to ignore them. Every artist who saw someone hurting and pretended it was part of the scene. We were all complicit, but I'm the one sitting here now, under oath, trying to make it right. Where are the rest of them? The room shifted. Even the judge adjusted slightly in his seat, watching the unfolding energy. Diddy sat motionless? But the tightness in his jaw, the subtle flex of his fist, betrayed him. The attorney tried one last pivot. You speak of these women, these so-called victims. But where are they? Why haven't they come forward? Chris's eyes darkened. Because they're scared. Because they've seen what happens to people who speak up. They lose everything. Their careers, their families, their safety. And when they look at someone like Diddy, they don't see a man. They see a machine. I don't blame them for staying silent. I blame the system that taught them silence was safer than truth. There was a long pause. The attorney stared at Chris. Chris stared back. Finally, the defense counsel stepped away. No further questions, he muttered. Chris remained seated, shoulders heavy, eyes unwavering. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't folded. He had stood on the stand and stared down $1 billion name, with nothing but his voice. In that courtroom, on that day, it echoed louder than money ever could. The judge glanced at the clock, then turned his eyes toward the witness stand. Mr. Brown, you may offer any final remarks before stepping down. Chris sat still for a moment, his breath quiet but steady. You could feel it. This wasn't just the end of a testimony. This was something heavier. The close of a silence that had stretched for years. He looked out across the courtroom, toward the jury, the reporters scribbling like mad, the woman in the front row, who hadn't blinked in 5 minutes, and finally, once more, toward Diddy. There was no rage in his expression, no dramatics, just a heavy, undeniable truth. I didn't come here to take Diddy down, Chris began, his voice raw but unwavering. I came here to speak up because every time I stayed quiet, I gave him more room to keep doing what he was doing. I helped him, even if I never laid a hand on anyone. And I'm done being part of that. He inhaled, his hands resting on the edges of the stand, shoulders rising and falling slowly. For years, I convinced myself it wasn't my responsibility, that because I wasn't the one handing out envelopes or leading girls into rooms, I was somehow innocent. But I wasn't. I saw things. I knew things. And I let fear make my decisions. For me, I let comfort make me a coward. His gaze dropped briefly to the floor, then back up, like something had cleared from his vision. There are girls who will never get to speak in this room. Girls who were silenced in ways we can't begin to understand. Some of them tried. Some of them whispered. But the system buried them. The fame, the power, the money, it covered everything. It protected the wrong man, and it punished the ones who dared to speak. Chris's voice lowered. You think they didn't come forward because they had nothing to say? No, they stayed quiet because they knew what it would cost them. They saw what happened to others who tried, how their names were dragged, their bodies judged, their stories turned into entertainment. And meanwhile, Diddy, he just kept smiling. Hosting, buying silence with champagne and endorsements. And we let him. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The judge quickly raised his hand. Chris didn't even acknowledge it. He was in something. Now, something deeper than fear. I'm not here because I hate him, Chris said, gesturing softly toward Diddy. I'm here because I remember every second of the night. I saw him lead that girl away. I remember her voice. I remember how she looked back, like she was hoping someone, anyone, would stop it. I was 10 feet away. I had a voice, and I said nothing. That's why I'm here. He leaned in slightly, not for effect, but because he had more to give. I've spent years performing for millions, pretending everything was fine. Taking interviews, dropping albums, doing press, all while carrying a secret I didn't want to admit I held. But the truth is, I was protecting a man who didn't deserve protection. I was guarding a legacy built on silence, on control, on fear. And if I don't say this now, if I don't tell you everything I've seen, then I'm no different than he is. Chris's jaw was set firmly now. His voice didn't shake. This trial isn't about one girl, or one night, or even one man. It's about a system that told people like me to shut up, to keep smiling, to keep singing, to stay loyal. And I'm standing here now because loyalty to fear is betrayal to truth. He looked at Diddy one last time. You know what you did, and so do I. Chris stood slowly, his eyes still forward. He didn't look to the press, didn't look to the audience. He stepped away from the witness stand with the same deliberate silence he had entered with. But everything was different now. The courtroom wasn't holding its breath anymore. It had exhaled, and nothing inside it would ever be the same.